سبيل الدموع سبيل مريح تنهدى يا صاحي كي تستريح.
Hey guys, I wanted to share with you the story of how I ended up reverting to Islam. I've really wrestled with sharing this publicly because not all of it is pleasant or completely my story to tell, but I feel like if even some part of this touches someone or helps someone, then I guess it's worth it. But I did tell the story in my live the other night, so if you saw that, then there's really no need to watch it again. It's just the same story. And if you are not an adult, please run this video by your parents first, because it's not kid friendly. Okay, so please. Okay, please. So yeah, I grew up in the Christian church, and the church that I grew up in, specifically that one, I heard a lot about God's love, and I felt like I never really saw God's love, or at least not as often as everybody talked about it. I saw a lot of envy, I saw a lot of jealousy, a lot of gossip, and I saw a lot of judgment. And I want to be really clear that when I'm talking about this, you know, there are people in my life, in my family, who still very much belong to that faith, and I want to be clear that I'm not talking about you guys. Like, mommy, if you ever see this, I'm not talking about you. You are a beautiful and pure spirit, and I'm not talking about you. But yeah, overall, it was not a positive experience for me growing up in that church. I was different. I was neurodivergent. I was a questioner, you know, and I just somehow never really fit. And when you didn't fit, you were judged constantly. And it all kind of culminated when the summer after I graduated high school. My father had a very, very public affair, a very ugly, very public affair. And he was also drinking a lot, and he would yeah. So, I mean, I begged my mom to leave him. I begged her. And she finally did. And when she did, the church cast us out. They cast us out, my mom, and then me for supporting my mom. And then when I supported my mom, my father's family cut me off completely. So I lost my father. I lost aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, everybody. They haven't spoken to me since. And that was so painful. And I was so angry and so hurt and just devastated. And then I went to college, and you have to understand that, like, the way that I grew up, there were some things that I just wasn't allowed to learn. Like, I can remember people in the church I grew up in expressing the belief that dinosaur bones were placed by Satan to confuse us. That the earth was 6,000 years old, and that evolution was a hoax by scientists, and that they had absolutely no evidence for it. Okay, so when I went to college, I took anthropology, and I had no idea what that was. I had never heard of anthropology. And when they just laid out all these facts of, like, how all of this had played out, I was mind blown. And I was furious, because I was like, I had been lied to my whole life. I had been brainwashed my whole life. And in college, I was able to meet other people who had other feelings and other things and other experiences. And it just really hammered home to me how sheltered I had been. So I completely left the church. I became an atheist. Frankly, I became a nihilist, where it was like, everything is meaningless. God is dead. Awful. And I was in a lot of pain for a lot of years. And, you know, about 5 years after that, I think, is when I started trying to pull some spiritual stuff back into my life, because I felt vibes, is kind of how I would call it. Like, I felt vibes. Like, I felt like the universe was more than could just be explained by us right now with our capabilities, right? And but I still had, like, a really strong passion for science, so I had no interest in going back to the Christian church that taught me that the world was 6,000 years old. So I started trying spiritualism, mysticism, all kinds of different things. And one of the things that I found interesting and frustrating was that even in these, like, non-religious spheres, you constantly had people trying to control every little thing you did. It was like, why are you using a black candle? You shouldn't be using a black candle. Why are you doing that on the full moon, babe? That is for the new moon only. Like, just ridiculous, right? And I got so frustrated with it. And over time, I started to become aware of this, like, deep energy that connected me to the earth, me to my fellow humans, me to the universe. And I didn't really understand it, but I could feel it. Okay. Like I knew I could feel it. So in 2020, and this is where the story gets intense. In 2020, that was the worst year of my life. I lost my job because of COVID. And the very same week that I lost my job, I was assaulted by a man brutally. I almost did not survive that experience. It's horrific to remember even now. It's been 3 years and it's horrific to remember. So there I was, that had just happened. I was dealing with the aftermath of that. I had just lost my job. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, I finally went to the doctor to, get tested and make sure I didn't have anything. And she called me right after my appointment. And I knew that was bad. I was like, what is it? What do I have? She called me and she told me, you're expecting a baby. And I just broke. I completely broke, completely fell apart. And I called my best friend and she told me right now, like, I will pay for it. Call and make an appointment. We will find somewhere open to make you an appointment and we will end this pregnancy. And I am very pro-choice. I will always be very pro-choice. But at that moment, at that moment as well, I was somebody who had a plan to be child-free. But at that moment, something happened that I couldn't explain. And it was like my whole body turned to stone, but not in an unpleasant way. It was just like I had become a weighted blanket, or like been very deeply wrapped like a burrito in a weighted blanket. And it was like this very small, very intense voice in my head said, you are going to have this baby. He is going to live and you are going to love him. And I just felt this certainty just spread from my chest through my whole body. And I told my friend, no, I'm keeping the baby. And she was shook. Like when I say my friend was shook, everybody was shook. Even my Christian mother, who is not pro-choice, was shook. And I have never regretted or faltered in that decision. And the story is taking me longer than I thought. So this is actually going to have to go into a part 2.